Admiral Velthar stood in the command center of his massive warship, watching the strange vessel on his screen. For 3 hours now, this unknown ship had been sitting at the edge of Craxian space, just floating there like it owned the place. The alien craft was smaller than his smallest fighter, sleek and white, with no visible weapons or armor plating. "What do our scanners tell us about this thing?" Velthar asked his crew. "Sir, it's like nothing we've ever seen. The hull material doesn't match anything in our database." "We can't even tell what it's made of," replied his science officer, tentacles twitching nervously. Velthar had ruled this sector of space for 20 years. In all that time, every species they encountered either surrendered immediately or got destroyed. There was never a third option. But this little ship was just sitting there, apparently unafraid of the 3 battle cruisers surrounding it. "Open a channel," he ordered. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Craxian territory without permission. Surrender immediately or face destruction." Inside, the human ship Horizon, Captain Kim Woo barely looked up from his cup of coffee. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair and kind eyes, the type of person you'd expect to be teaching children rather than exploring dangerous alien space. His ship was indeed small, just 12 crew members, most of them young officers on their first deep space mission. "Captain, they're demanding we surrender," said Lieutenant Park Min from the communications station. She was fresh out of the academy, still excited about everything they encountered out here. "Surrender?" Wu chuckled softly. "That's interesting. What exactly do they think we've done wrong?" "Apparently existing in their general area is a crime, sir," replied Min with a smile. Wu walked over to look at the alien ships on their main screen. The Craxian vessels were huge, each one easily 50 times the size of the Horizon. They looked like flying cities, covered in weapons and thick armor plating. Dark metal hulls were covered with spikes and threatening angles, designed to intimidate anyone who saw them. "Well, let's be polite," Wu said. "Send them our first contact package. The basic one, just our greeting, some information about human culture, maybe a few recipes. Nothing military." The crew worked quickly, preparing a data package that included basic information about humanity, where they came from, what they liked to eat, their music and art. It was the same package they sent to every new species they met, designed to show they came in peace. On the Craxian flagship, Velthar watched as data flowed across his screens. Pictures of humans doing normal things, families eating together, children playing, artists creating beautiful works. It was unlike anything the Craxians had ever received from other species. "Sir, they're not responding to our demands," reported his communications officer. "Instead, they sent us recipes for something called pizza." Velthar's 4 eyes narrowed. In 30 years of military service, no one had ever ignored his surrender demands. Species either gave up immediately or prepared for battle. They certainly didn't send cooking instructions. "Fire warning shots across their bow," he ordered. "Show them we mean business." The Craxian ships opened fire, sending bright energy beams just past the human vessel. It was meant to scare them, to show the massive destructive power they possessed. In space battles, most enemies would either flee or return fire at this point. "Captain." Wu watched the energy beams flash past his ship and sighed deeply. "Well, that's unfortunate. I was hoping we could solve this with conversation." "Should we raise shields, Captain?" asked Ensign Li Han from the weapons station. He was the youngest crew member, barely 22 years old. "I suppose we should." "Han, can't be too careful with our first alien contact." Wu pressed a single button on his command chair. What happened next would have been impossible for the Craxians to understand, even if they had been watching carefully. In exactly 2.7 seconds, the Horizon's computers had completed a full analysis of all 3 alien ships. They mapped every weapon system, calculated the exact power output of their engines, identified the chemical composition of their hulls, and found 17 critical structural weaknesses that could be exploited in combat. The human ship's defensive systems activated silently. No visible shields appeared, no energy barriers flickered to life. The Horizon simply became impossible to hit by any weapon the Craxians possessed, though they wouldn't know this until they tried. "Interesting technology," commented Dr. Park. Sung, the ship's science officer. She was a brilliant woman in her 40s who had spent her life studying alien cultures. Their weapons are actually quite primitive. I'd estimate they're about 50 years behind our current military technology. 50 years? Asked Min. That seems generous. I'm being kind, Sung replied with a smile. Captain Wu looked at the tactical display showing all the information they had gathered. Fleet composition, weapon capabilities, shield frequencies, engine specifications, everything Earth's military would need to know about this new species. I think we have everything we need here, he said calmly. Min, set course for home. Let's go tell everyone what we found. Yes, sir. Should I tell them we're leaving? That would be polite, but I don't think they'll listen anyway. Lieutenant, Park Min sent a final message to the Craxian fleet. Thank you for the interesting meeting. We're heading home now. Have a pleasant day. Before Admiral Velthar could respond, the human ship simply disappeared. Not like it had jumped to hyperspace. The Craxians would have detected that. Not like it had cloaked. Their sensors would have noticed the energy signature. The horizon was simply there one moment and gone the next, as if it had never existed at all. Velthar stared at the empty space where the alien ship had been, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. In his entire military career, nothing like this had ever occurred. Ships didn't just vanish without a trace. Sir, should we pursue them? Asked his tactical officer. Pursue them where? Velthar replied quietly. We don't even know which direction. They went. Deep in his mind, a small voice was telling him that maybe, just maybe, the Craxian Empire had encountered something it couldn't handle. But he pushed that thought away. Nothing could challenge Craxian might. Nothing ever had. He was wrong, of course, but he wouldn't learn that until it was far too late. Part 2. Intelligence Gathering. Admiral Li Jin sat in his office on Earth, surrounded by holographic displays showing the most detailed intelligence report humanity had ever received about an alien civilization. The data from Captain Wu's mission filled the room with glowing charts, star maps, and technical specifications. At 62 years old, Jin had seen humanity's first steps into deep space, but nothing had prepared him for this. Captain Wu, walk me through this again, Jin said, leaning back in his chair. 300 star systems. Wu nodded, still somewhat amazed by what his small ship had discovered. Yes, sir. The Craxian Empire is massive. They've been expanding for over 800 years, conquering every species they encounter. From what we could gather, they've never met serious resistance. Dr. Choi Hana, the fleet's chief technology officer, stepped forward with her tablet full of analysis data. She was a brilliant woman in her 50s who had helped design most of humanity's current spacecraft. Her expression was a mixture of fascination and concern. Admiral, their fleet size is enormous, she began. We're talking about 80,000. Warships of various classes, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, support vessels. They have more ships than some species have people. Jin whistled softly. 80,000. And how many ships do we have in our entire fleet? About 1,200 combat vessels, sir, replied Captain Wu, though that doesn't include our patrol ships and reconnaissance craft. The numbers seemed overwhelming. Humanity had been exploring space for less than 2 centuries, while the Craxians had been building their empire for almost a millennium. They controlled nearly half of this galaxy's populated systems and ruled over 47 different alien species with absolute authority. Tell me about their technology, Jin requested. Dr. Choi pulled up a holographic display showing Craxian weapon systems. This is where things get interesting, Admiral. Their ships are impressive in size and number, but their actual technology is surprisingly outdated. She highlighted various components of a Craxian battle cruiser. Their energy weapons use focused plasma beams, effective but incredibly inefficient. Their shields operate on basic particle deflection, nothing like our adaptive defense systems. And their engines, she paused, shaking her head. Sir, they're still using chemical fusion. For primary propulsion. Chemical fusion, Jin asked. We stopped using that for military vessels decades ago. Exactly. Their most advanced weapons are roughly equivalent to what we were using 50 years ago, maybe 60 years in some cases. Captain Wu added, Dr. Choi is being generous, Admiral. When their ships fired those warning shots at us, our computers analyzed the energy signatures automatically. Their weapons wouldn't even scratch the paint on our current destroyers. Jin stood up and walked to the large window overlooking Earth's primary naval shipyard. Hundreds of sleek human vessels moved through space in perfect formation, some heading out on exploration missions, others returning from patrol duties. Each ship represented the pinnacle of human engineering and technology. So we're facing an empire with overwhelming numbers, but inferior technology, he mused. What about their military tactics? Brute force mostly, Wu replied. From the historical data we gathered, they typically send massive fleets to any system that resists them. They don't use complex strategies, just overwhelming firepower. And numbers. Dr. Choi brought up another display. Admiral, there's something else you should know. We detected signs that many of the species under Craxian rule aren't there by choice. Slave labor, forced tribute, entire populations relocated to work in their mining operations. Jin's expression hardened. Humanity had strict policies about slavery and oppression. They had learned those lessons the hard way in their own history. How many species are we talking about? 47 confirmed. Possibly more. Some of the data was encrypted, but what we could decode suggests millions of people living under harsh conditions. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, the Craxian capital world buzzed with activity. Emperor Zexthul sat on his throne in the center of a massive war room, surrounded by his top generals and admirals. The emperor was ancient even by Craxian standards, having ruled for over 3 centuries. His forearms gestured dramatically as he spoke to his assembled war council. "My generals, we face a new situation," he announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. "For the first time in decades, we have encountered a species that did not immediately surrender to our forces." General Mortag stepped forward. He was younger than the emperor, but still ancient by most species standards, with scars covering his dark green skin from 100 battles. "My lord, surely this is just another primitive species that needs to be taught proper respect for Craxian authority." "Perhaps," the emperor replied, "but Admiral Velthar's report was unusual. The alien vessel demonstrated technology he had never seen before. It disappeared without using any known method of faster-than-light travel." Another general, Kexvor, laughed dismissively. "My lord, with respect, Velthar is getting old. Perhaps he simply lost track of a small ship in the vastness of space." Emperor Zexthul considered this. In 800 years of expansion, the Craxian Empire had never encountered a species with technology superior to their own. Every civilization they found was either less advanced or roughly equal to their capabilities. The idea that some unknown species might actually be more advanced seemed impossible. "Still," the emperor said slowly, "this new species represents a potential threat to our expansion plans. We cannot allow unknown factors to interfere with our operations in that sector." General Mortag stepped forward eagerly. "My lord, I request permission to deploy the 5th Imperial Armada. 12,000 ships should be more than sufficient to eliminate this minor irritation." The emperor nodded approvingly. Mortag was his most aggressive general, perfect for dealing with stubborn species that needed to be taught harsh lessons. "Granted, General. Take the 5th Armada and investigate this human homeworld. If they can be conquered, do so. If they resist, destroy them completely." "It will be my pleasure, my lord," Mortag replied with a savage grin. "How long should I allow for this operation?" 1 week should be sufficient for any resistance they might offer," the emperor said dismissively. After all, how dangerous could they possibly be? Back on Earth, Admiral Jin finished reviewing all the intelligence data. The picture was clear. Humanity faced an enormous empire with massive military forces, but inferior technology. The question was whether their technological advantage would be enough to overcome such overwhelming numbers. "What's your recommendation, Captain?" Jin asked. Wu thought carefully before answering. "Sir, I believe we need to prepare for the possibility that they'll come looking for us. My ship's appearance in their space might have been seen as a threat, Doctor." Choi agreed. "If their history is any indication, they don't negotiate, they conquer or destroy." Jin nodded slowly. "Then we'd better make sure we're ready for them." Part 3. The Trap Springs. General Mortag stood on the bridge of his flagship, Dominator, a massive vessel that had conquered over 50 star systems during his long military career. Around him, 11,999. Other Craxian warships moved in perfect formation through hyperspace, heading toward what their intelligence suggested was a primitive world called Earth. "General, we're approaching the target system," reported his navigation officer. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds. Mortag smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This would be another easy victory to add to his record. One small reconnaissance ship did not make a dangerous enemy. In his experience, species with advanced scouts usually had weak home defenses. They put all their resources into exploration rather than proper military strength. "All ships, prepare for immediate combat operations," he commanded. "I want this system secured within the hour." The Fifth Armada dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, their massive forms blocking out stars as they arranged themselves in attack formation. Mortag expected to see defensive fleets rushing to meet them, or at least military installations preparing for battle. Instead, his sensors showed something completely unexpected. "Sir, I'm not detecting any major military presence," reported his tactical officer, confusion clear in his voice. "There are some structures scattered throughout the system, but they appear to be civilian installations." Mortag looked at the tactical display with growing puzzlement. Scattered throughout the solar system were what appeared to be mining platforms, communication satellites, and research stations. They looked harmless enough, simple metal structures with solar panels and basic equipment. Near the third planet, he could see normal civilian traffic moving between what seemed to be space stations and the planet's surface. "Where is their fleet?" he demanded. "Surely they have some kind of military presence." "Sir, our sensors detect no warships larger than small patrol craft. Most of the vessels near the planet appear to be cargo ships and passenger transports." Admiral Kexmore, Mortag's second-in-command, moved closer to examine the sensor data. "General, perhaps their military is hiding behind the planet or its moon." "Impossible," Mortag replied. "Our sensors would detect any significant military presence within 100 million kilometers. These humans are either incredibly foolish or incredibly confident." On one of the mining platforms near Jupiter, Lieutenant Commander Park Yoon watched the Craxian fleet's arrival with professional interest. The structure she commanded looked exactly like a civilian mining operation from the outside. Solar panels, ore processing equipment, and worker living quarters. In reality, it was one of 47 heavily armed defense platforms hidden throughout the solar system. "Command, this is Mining Platform 7, she reported through encrypted channels. "I count approximately 12,000 enemy vessels. They're maintaining formation, but haven't made any aggressive moves yet." "Copy that, 7, came Admiral Li Jin's voice from the hidden command center on Earth. "All platforms maintain cover until they fire first. We want this on record as a clear act of aggression." Dr. Choi Hana, monitoring the situation from Earth's primary military command center, shook her head as she watched the Craxian fleet's slow approach. "They're not even scanning properly. If they used active sensors, they'd realize those platforms aren't what they appear to be." "Their technology really is decades behind ours," agreed Captain Kim Woo, who was serving as tactical advisor for the defense operation. "They're relying on basic passive sensors and visual identification." Back on the Dominator, General Mortag was growing impatient. "This is taking too long. If they want to hide behind civilian installations, so be it. All ships target those platforms and satellites first. Once we clear the system of their infrastructure, we'll proceed to the planet." "Sir, are you certain?" "They appear to be civilian targets," his tactical officer asked hesitantly. "Civilian or military, it makes no difference," Mortag snarled. "Any species that refuses to surrender immediately deserves whatever happens to them. Fire at will." The lead Craxian battleship opened fire with its main plasma cannons, sending bright energy beams toward what appeared to be a simple communication satellite near Mars. The moment those weapons fired, everything changed. The communication satellite instantly transformed, its outer shell dropping away to reveal a sophisticated weapons platform, bristling with defensive systems. But more than that, every other seemingly civilian structure throughout the solar system activated simultaneously. Lieutenant Commander Park Yoon felt a familiar excitement as her platform's true systems came online. "All right, people, this is what we trained for. Target Priority Alpha. That flagship looks particularly ugly." The mining platform that had been peacefully collecting asteroids moments before suddenly sprouted dozens of weapon ports. Advanced targeting systems locked onto the Craxian flagship, while defensive shields materialized around the platform's true hull. Within seconds, 47 hidden weapons platforms throughout the solar system revealed themselves. What the Craxians had mistaken for harmless civilian infrastructure was actually the most sophisticated defense network humanity had ever constructed. The first coordinated strike was devastating. Human weapons decades more advanced than anything the Craxians possessed, fired with precision that seemed impossible. Energy beams that adjusted their frequency in real time to penetrate Craxian shields. Kinetic weapons that curved through space to strike targets from unexpected angles. Missiles that split into dozens of smaller warheads, each one seeking a different weak point on enemy vessels. General Mortag watched in horror as 24 of his ships disappeared in brilliant explosions within the first 30 seconds of combat. His flagship shook violently as weapons he couldn't even detect struck its shields with impossible accuracy. "What's happening?" he screamed at his tactical officer. "Where are these weapons coming from?" "Sir, those platforms, they're not civilian installations. They're military weapons platforms, and they're using technology we've never encountered before." The Craxian fleet tried to return fire, but their weapons seemed pitiful in comparison. Plasma beams that should have destroyed the human platforms simply dispersed harmlessly against shields that adapted to counter them. Meanwhile, human weapons continued their relentless assault with mechanical precision. "This is Admiral Lee Jin of the Terran Defense Fleet," came a calm, steady voice across all Craxian communication channels. The voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded fleets for decades, and the confidence of someone who held all the advantages in this battle. "You came to our home system uninvited and opened fire on our installations. We consider this an act of war. However, we are not unreasonable people. Surrender immediately, and we will allow your surviving crews to return home with a message. For your leaders." General Mortag stared at his tactical display in disbelief. In less than 5 minutes, he had lost nearly 1,000 ships to an enemy that had appeared out of nowhere. His mighty Fifth Armada, which had conquered entire star systems, was being systematically destroyed by weapons platforms that had been hiding in plain sight. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his tactical officer, fear evident in his voice. Mortag looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. For the first time in his long military career, he was facing an enemy that was clearly superior in every way that mattered, but his pride wouldn't let him admit defeat so easily. "All ships, continue the attack," he ordered through gritted teeth. "Focus fire on the third planet. If we can't destroy their platforms, we'll destroy their world." It was exactly the wrong decision, but Admiral Lee Jin had been counting on Craxian pride to make exactly that mistake. The real battle was just beginning, and humanity was ready. Part 4. Revelation of Power. General Mortag gripped the armrests of his command chair as another wave of explosions lit up the space around his flagship. The hidden weapons platforms were devastating his fleet, but he still believed he could win through sheer numbers. After all, 12,000 ships had to count for something. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human admiral," his communications officer reported, voice shaking. "Put it through," Mortag snarled. "I want to hear what these cowards have to say before we crush their pathetic planet." Admiral Lee Jin's calm voice filled the bridge of the Dominator. "General Mortag, I'm giving you one final chance to surrender. Your forces are outmatched, and continuing this battle will only result in unnecessary casualties." "Outmatched?" Mortag laughed harshly. "You have a few dozen weapons platforms against my 12,000 ships. Even if your technology is superior, numbers will win in the end." There was a pause before Jin responded, and Mortag thought he detected amusement in the human's voice. "General, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Those platforms weren't our main defense force. They were just the opening act." "What do you mean?" Mortag demanded. But his answer came not from words, but from what he saw on his tactical display. The space around the Craxian fleet began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. At first, Mortag thought it was some kind of sensor, malfunction or interference from the weapons platforms. Then the shimmering intensified, and reality seemed to ripple and bend. "Sir, massive energy signatures appearing throughout the system," his sensor officer reported in a panic. "I'm reading and this can't be right." "What is it?" Mortag shouted. "Sir, we're detecting hundreds of vessels decloaking simultaneously." "They're everywhere. Above us, below us, surrounding our entire formation." The shimmer effect reached its peak, and suddenly the empty space around the Craxian fleet was filled with warships. Not the crude angular vessels that most species built for war, but sleek predators that seemed to flow through space like living creatures. Captain Kim Woo stood on the bridge of the Soul, one of humanity's newest battleships. At half the size of a Craxian battlecruiser, it didn't look particularly intimidating, but appearances could be deceiving. The Soul and her sister ships represented decades of human innovation in spacecraft design and warfare technology. "All ships, this is Admiral Jin," came the voice through the fleet communications. "Weapons free, show them what real military technology looks like." Lieutenant Park Min, now serving as Woo's tactical officer, smiled as she activated the ship's weapon systems. "Sir, we have target lock on 17 enemy vessels. Shall I begin the demonstration?" "Proceed, Lieutenant. Let's give them something to think about." What happened next would have seemed impossible to any military strategist from the Craxian Empire. The human warships moved with coordination that bordered on telepathic, each vessel knowing exactly where every other ship would be at any given moment. They flowed around the Craxian formation like water around rocks, never getting in each other's way, never blocking friendly fire lines. General Mortag watched in growing horror as his massive fleet was systematically taken apart. Human weapons, sliced through Craxian shields as if they didn't exist. Energy beams that somehow adjusted their frequency in real time to find the exact weakness in each shield system. Kinetic projectiles that curved through space in ways that defied physics, striking targets from impossible angles. "Return fire, all ships return fire," he screamed at his fleet. The Craxian ships tried to fight back, their plasma cannons and missile systems unleashing everything they had. But it was like watching children with slingshots trying to fight trained soldiers with advanced rifles. Human defensive systems neutralized incoming fire with casual efficiency, while their own weapons found their targets with accuracy that shouldn't have been mathematically possible. Dr. Choi Hana, monitoring the battle from Earth's command center, shook her head as she watched the tactical display. "It's not even close to being a fair fight. Our targeting computers are processing battlefield information faster than their crews can even react." "How much faster?" asked Admiral Jin. "Our ships are making tactical decisions and executing maneuvers in milliseconds. Their ships take several seconds just to process what's happening and communicate orders to their crews. It's like watching someone try to fight while moving in slow motion." But the most unnerving aspect for the Craxian commanders wasn't the superior weapons or defensive systems. It was the way human ships seemed to know what the Craxians were going to do before they did it. Admiral Kexmore, Mortag's second-in-command, tried to execute a flanking maneuver with 3 squadrons of destroyers, only to find human ships already waiting in position to intercept them before he had even finished giving the orders. "How are they doing this?" he demanded of his tactical staff. "Are they reading our communications?" "No, sir. All channels are encrypted and secure. It's like they can predict our movements." What the Craxians didn't understand was that human computer systems were analyzing their formation patterns, ship movements, and tactical decisions in real time. After centuries of studying military history and tactics, human artificial intelligence could predict enemy behavior with remarkable accuracy. Every move the Craxian fleet made followed predictable patterns that humanity's computers had already identified and prepared for. "Sir, we've lost 60% of our forces," Mortag's tactical officer reported, his voice cracking with panic. "Our weapons aren't having any significant effect on their ships." That was when Captain Kim Woo's voice came through on the emergency channel, speaking directly to the Craxian flagship. "General Mortag, I should mention something that might interest you. That reconnaissance vessel you encountered at your border, the one you tried to capture, that was our oldest, most outdated scout ship. We use it for training new pilots. Mortag felt his blood turn cold. What do you mean? The Horizon was built 30 years ago using technology we now consider obsolete. We keep it in service because it's good for teaching young officers how to handle older equipment. If you couldn't deal with our training ship, what did you think would happen when you met our actual military? The implications hit Mortag like a physical blow. The vessel that had effortlessly escaped from 3 of his battle cruisers wasn't even a proper military ship. It was the equivalent of a training vehicle. And if that was humanity's weakest vessel, all ships, retreat, full reverse, maximum speed, he ordered desperately. But when his surviving ships tried to activate their hyperspace engines, nothing happened. Engineer after engineer reported the same impossible result. Their faster-than-light systems simply wouldn't function. Lieutenant Commander Park Yoon, still manning her weapons platform near Jupiter, smiled as she monitored the jamming field. Her station was projecting. "Command, this is Platform 7. Hyperspace interdiction field is holding steady. None of their ships can jump to FTL." "Copy that, 7, Admiral Jin replied. "Maintain the field. We want to make sure they get home safely to deliver our message." Mortag realized with growing despair that humanity had not only defeated his fleet, but had also trapped them in the system using technology that Craxians couldn't even detect, let alone understand. They were completely at the mercy of an enemy that had proven to be superior in every conceivable way. What do you want?" he asked over the communication channel, his pride finally broken. "We want you to go home," Admiral Jin replied. Simply, "We want you to tell your Emperor exactly what happened here, and we want you to make it very clear that Earth is under human protection now." The once mighty Fifth Armada, reduced to a few hundred battered survivors, could only wait helplessly as humanity decided their fate. Part 5. New Galactic Order. General Mortag sat in what remained of his flagship's command center, staring at damage reports that seemed impossible to believe. Of his 12,000 ships, fewer than 400 had survived the encounter with humanity's fleet. The proud Fifth Armada, which had conquered entire star systems, had been reduced to a collection of limping vessels held together by emergency, repairs and desperate hope. "Sir, the humans are allowing us to leave," reported his communications officer, still unable to hide the shock in his voice. "Admiral Jin says we're free to return home, but we're to carry a message to the Emperor." "What message?" Mortag asked wearily. "That Earth and all human territories are now under the protection of the Terran Defense Fleet. Any further aggression against human interests will be met with appropriate force." 3 days later, the battered remnants of the Fifth Armada finally limped back into Craxian space. Word of their devastating defeat had already spread through unofficial channels, but seeing the physical evidence was something else entirely. Massive warships that had once been the pride of the Craxian military now looked like scrap metal, held together by sheer willpower. Emperor Zexthul sat on his throne in the Great War Room, surrounded by his remaining generals and advisors. For the first time in his 3-century reign, the ancient ruler looked genuinely shaken. The reports from General Mortag were almost too incredible to believe. "You're telling me," the Emperor said slowly, "that the humans destroyed 11,600 ships in less than 2 hours?" "Yes, my lord," Mortag replied, his voice hollow with defeat. "Their technology is beyond anything we've encountered. Our weapons couldn't even scratch their hulls, while they destroyed our ships with single shots. And their numbers. We counted approximately 800 vessels, my lord. Each one was smaller than our battle cruisers, but infinitely more powerful." General Kexivor, one of the Emperor's oldest advisors, stepped forward skeptically. "Surely, you're exaggerating, Mortag. No species could possess such overwhelming technological superiority." Mortag's tired eyes flashed with anger. "Would you like to see the battle recordings, General? Watch our ships explode like toys while their vessels move through our formations like ghosts? Or perhaps you'd prefer to examine what's left of the Devastator, all 3 pieces of it." The war room fell silent. The Devastator had been one of their most powerful dreadnoughts, a ship that had single-handedly conquered 15 star systems. If it had been reduced to debris, Dr. Velnash, the Empire's chief scientist, examined the sensor data with growing amazement. My lord, if these readings are accurate, human weapons technology is at least 50 years ahead of our own. Possibly. More? How is that possible? Demanded the Emperor. They've only been spacefaring for 2 centuries. Sometimes, my lord, a younger species can advance faster, precisely because they're not limited by old ways of thinking, Dr. Velnash replied carefully. They built their technology from scratch, while we've been using the same basic designs for centuries. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other spacefaring civilizations were intercepting communication logs from the battle. The news spread like wildfire through diplomatic channels, trade networks, and military intelligence services. The Craxian Empire, which had terrorized star systems for over 2 millennia, had been utterly defeated by a species most civilizations had never even heard of. On the ocean world of Aquatica, the Cetacean Council convened an emergency session. "The humans defeated the Craxians?" asked High Counselor Reefsong in amazement. "The same Craxians who demanded tribute from us for 300 years. "Not just defeated," replied Intelligence Director Wavecaller. "Annihilated. They destroyed an entire Imperial armada, and then let the survivors go home to spread the word." Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy. The Avian Confederacy, the Silicon Collective, the Botanical Union, every major civilization was reassessing their understanding of galactic politics. For centuries, the Craxian Empire had been the dominant military power, expanding relentlessly and crushing any resistance. Now suddenly there was a new player in the game. Admiral Li Jin stood on the bridge of the Soul, humanity's newest flagship, as it began its first patrol of what had been Craxian territory just days before. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, sleek, powerful, and packed with technology that made even their newest vessels seem advanced beyond anything their enemies possessed. "Sir, we're receiving multiple communications," reported Commander Park Su, a young officer who had distinguished herself during the battle preparations. 17 different species are requesting formal diplomatic contact with Earth. "What kind of requests?" Jin asked. "Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, scientific exchange programs. They all want to establish positive relations with humanity as quickly as possible." Jin smiled. It seemed that news of humanity's military capabilities had spread faster than their ships could travel. "Accept all the diplomatic requests, schedule meetings with each species' representatives, and make sure they understand that we're interested in peaceful cooperation, not conquest." "Yes, sir. Also, we're receiving surrender offers from 17 Craxian systems. Local governors and military commanders are asking to place themselves under human protection." That was more surprising. Jin had expected some Craxian territories to declare independence after their defeat, but he hadn't anticipated them actively seeking human protection. "What's their reasoning?" "According to their messages, sir, they're afraid that when news of the Fifth Armada's defeat reaches other parts of the Empire, there might be internal power struggles. They'd rather be under human protection than risk civil war." "Accept them all," Jin replied, after a moment's consideration. "Send them our standard protection agreement. It seems the galaxy needs new management." Dr. Choi Hana, who had been monitoring communications from the ship's science station, looked up with an amused expression. "Admiral, you should see some of these intercepted transmissions. Half the galaxy thinks we have thousands of ships patrolling their borders. How many do they think we have? Conservative estimates range from 5,000 to 50,000 vessels. The Botanical Union's intelligence service believes we have over 100,000 ships," Jin laughed. "If only they knew the truth. We have exactly 1,243 combat vessels in our entire fleet." "Should we correct their assumptions?" asked Commander Park. "Not necessarily," Jin replied thoughtfully. "Sometimes perception is more powerful than reality. If they think we have a massive fleet, they're less likely to test our resolve." Captain Kim Woo, who had been listening to the conversation from his position at the tactical station, shook his head in amazement. "To think this all started because they were afraid of the horizon. Wait until they see what our actual battle fleet looks like." Dr. Choi pulled up a holographic display showing humanity's current military vessels. "Speaking of which, Admiral, The new Indomitable-class dreadnoughts will be ready for deployment next month. Each one is 3 times more powerful than our current flagship. How do they compare to what we faced the Craxians with? The ships we used against the 5th Armada represent our standard fleet from 5 years ago. The new vessels are significantly more advanced. Jin looked out at the stars, thinking about the future. Humanity had stumbled into a position of galactic leadership almost by accident. They had built their military for exploration and defense, never expecting to become the dominant power in this region of space. But with great power came great responsibility. Set course for the Rigel system, he ordered. We have some former Craxian subjects to meet with. And Commander Park? Yes, sir. Draft a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to need more diplomats out here. A lot more diplomats. As the Soul moved through space toward its next destination, similar scenes were playing out throughout the galaxy. Humanity's fleet was small by galactic standards, but their technological superiority and decisive victory over the Craxians had fundamentally changed the balance of power. The age of Craxian domination was over, and a new era of human influence was just beginning. The galaxy would never be the same.